All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get started. So thank you all so much for joining us here today, right? For another installment of the Cloudbyz Conversations webinar series. So today we'll be talking about a really interesting and I think a very relevant topic for some of the things that we're hearing about in the news, and that is pharmacovigilance and signal detection. Right, so we're here today to talk about some of the challenges and some of the trends, right, that are facing the PV and the signal detection industry here. So today I'm really happy to be joined by my colleague Manoj Kashyap. So Manoj is a data engineer here at Cloudbyz, and he's been specializing in kind of Tableau and also doing some data visualizations and statistical analysis. So before we get started, let me quickly introduce Manoj. Manoj, go ahead.
Hi, folks. It's Manoj Kashyap. I work as a data engineer at Cloudbyz. I work on data migration, creating and maintaining data pipelines and all. And I'm based out of Chicago. That's about me.
All right. Thank you so much for that, Manoj. And folks, I think, many of you probably know me, but my name is Dushyant Raichur. I am the manager of product marketing here at Cloudbyz. Right. And so, I've been kind of leading this series along with Bernadette Dadka here, who's our marketing manager. Bernadette is going to serve as our kind of moderator, right, for today's conversation. So, I'm super excited here to be talking about pharmacovigilance and signal detection. Just want to set some expectations here around this webinar. So first and foremost, we really encourage questions, right? So please feel free to throw them in the chat. Right. And then I know Bernadette is going to be kind of watching the chat to make sure that we're capturing all the questions. We do have about 5 to 10 minutes at the end here to kind of go through and answer any questions. Right. So just please feel free to kind of put those in the chat, and Bernadette will make sure that Manoj and I see those at the end of the presentation. All right, so with that, folks, let's go ahead and jump in and start our discussion here. So this is the agenda for today. We just went through our intros. So I'd like to quickly maybe set the scene for you around Cloudbyz, who we are, what we do. And then I'd really like us to kind of jump into the topic at hand and talk about signal detection, talk a little bit about pharmacovigilance and how those two kind of sit together. Right, I want to talk about some of the challenges that we're facing in the signal detection space, and then also how to solve them. Right, and then my colleague Manoj here has prepared a beautiful demo for us that involves Tableau and how it sits on top of Salesforce. And so Manoj will have about 5-ish minutes there to kind of go through from a high level and kind of show some of the examples of how we overcome some of the challenges that I'll be talking about. And that should leave us with just about 10-ish minutes or so for the question and answer portion. And like I said, please put those in the chat and we will get to those at the end. All right, next slide, please, Bern. All right, folks, so Cloudbyz, who we are, what we do. So Cloudbyz is the fastest growing clinical trial management company on the planet, right? 100% of our solutions are built native to the Salesforce cloud platform, right? So we have a unified solution kind of meant for all corners of the market. And we really exist, folks, to help clinical trials run more safely, more effectively, and be able to bring in drugs, devices, and therapies into the market faster to improve and save patient lives. Right? It's pretty simple. That's really why we're here. Just to give maybe a little bit of background, right? We've been in the industry since about 2014, and we came, our two co-founders came up with this idea after looking at the clinical trial space, kind of seeing that there was a point solution for every single kind of piece of the puzzle, right? Whether we're talking about eTMF, whether we're talking about patient recruitment, pharmacovigilance, medical device safety, and now, of course, the ability to have signal detection, right? Oftentimes in the industry, those are all different applications, different solutions, different logins, right? And because of their disparate nature, right, they don't talk to each other, most of these. And if they do, it's a custom, implementation, and that can take time and resources. And so our co-founders thought to themselves, what if we had one single system that had everything, included end to end? And that's exactly what Cloudbyz does. So just wanted to kind of set the scene here as to what we do. As you can see, we were recently named a top 5 emerging pharmacovigilance startup. And just this past spring, we were named as Inc.'s 30th fastest growing company in the Midwest. So yeah, that's it about the Cloudbyz portion anyway. So folks, let's kind of jump into the topic at hand here, right? Let's discuss a little bit of signal detection. And before we go too far and start talking about challenges or start showing you any kind of demo, it's really important that we set the scene, right, as to what we're talking about here. So before we can even really get into signal detection, right, I think we need to set the scene around pharmacovigilance. Great. So pharmacovigilance and signal detection, right, they really kind of go together hand in hand, right? And so, so really quickly, I'd like to talk about pharmacovigilance, right? You may also know it as drug safety, and it really just relates to the collection, detection, assessment, and monitoring, and as well as prevention, right, of adverse, effects associated to pharmaceutical products, right? And so we need pharmacovigilance, or PV to keep it short, right, to develop safe medicines and bring them into the market, right? And so there are really two pieces to any pharmacovigilance kind of practice, and it does depend on what kind of organization you are, right? Pharmacovigilance is just as important in the preclinical space, in the market space, in the clinical trial space, as it is in the post-market space, right? And so while there are different requirements, maybe different workflows, we know that pharmacovigilance is a very important part of any type of pharma or, HLS organization. It's incredibly important that pharmacovigilance is taken as top of mind. So that's just a quick primer about pharmacovigilance before we start talking about signal detection. Right, so if pharmacovigilance is the what, right, when it comes to drug safety, well, then signal detection is the how, right? Signal detection is what involves looking at adverse reaction data for patterns that may suggest some sort of new safety information, right? So it is really the way in which we operationalize some of our pharmacovigilance practices to make sure that we're looking at the data to tell us when there are new signals that need to be considered, right? And so signals, the CIOMS working group kind of refers to a signal somewhat legalistically, if you will, as information that suggests a new potential causal association or new aspect of a known association between an intervention and an event or a set of events. And really what that means is, right, we're looking at the causal mechanism between one set of adverse reactions, right, and what their cause could be. Right. And so that's really the signal detection. And that's really, of course, but also pharmacovigilance is also trying to measure. But signal detection is the way in which we do that. It's how we operationalize some of pharmacovigilance, right? Using data, using numbers, and kind of really looking at the whole picture. Right. So these signals, they can be generated from qualitative analysis of spontaneous reports or quantitative. Right. So here today, we're really going to be talking a little bit more about the quantitative space. Right. And that's what we're maybe going to be focusing on a little bit more, but we know that both of these are pretty important. And if we're thinking about some examples of what signal detection can be, you can think about it in a few different ways. Either it's a brand new effect, right, that we're capturing right now. Right. So let's say that I'm testing out some sort of, let's say, a vaccine, a COVID vaccine in this case, right? And we're seeing maybe a set of brand new adverse effects that we never saw before. That is an example of a signal, and certain statistical methods would tell us that, hey, this cluster, let's say, of these adverse events that are happening, these seem to be in a statistically significant level, such that kind of given the numbers and given the per capita, we think that this is a new set of effects that are happening out there that we didn't plan for in our clinical trials. Another example can be maybe the adverse event is not new. It was captured at the clinical trial level or in the safety data. We knew that this is a possibility, but it's happening in greater frequency, right? So maybe it was happening to 1 in every 1,000 patients, but now it's happening to 10 in every 1,000 patients, right? So that's a 10x increase. So we should be looking at that and kind of seeing what's going on. And a third example of what signal detection, the form it can take, is that let's say a certain group of patients is now has more likely chances of developing some sort of adverse effect. So let's say men, the age over 45, suddenly we're seeing a big increase in a certain adverse event that seems to be mostly limited to that demographic group. right? And so that can be either something that's new or something that's existing, but we're just seeing it crop up in a certain patient group. And so that is also a good example of a signal. And if we want to drill down even a little further on this, the reason why this is kind of necessary, and I'll get into a little bit more of this, the reason why these signal detection is so necessary is because we know that while clinical trials are a great way of testing the safety and the efficacy of our pharmaceutical product, we know that oftentimes it doesn't tell the full picture, right? Clinical studies, for the most part, are going to be taking place in a very controlled environment, right? We have control over the inputs, over some of the certain variables that may have influence. But once you have a drug out there in the marketplace, now people are just taking it, and there might be some things that are really impossible to plan for, right? So that's really why signal detection is really so key as we're talking about pharmacovigilance here. All right, so just to drill a little bit deeper, right, as to why this is so important, right? We know that signal detection and assessment is the most important aspect in pharmacovigilance, and it plays a key role in making sure that all of the drugs that we take are safe, right? If we just kind of look through our own, let's say, medical history, right? We're all taking some sort of, some sort of pill or some sort of drug, right? Right. Many of us take them maybe every day for certain conditions, or certainly when we get sick, right? Whether it's the Tylenol, right, that we take if we have a really bad headache, right? Or, everything to, the new Paxlovid drug that has just been, approved by the FDA for COVID treatment. Right. So it kind of spans the gamut between things that we take every single day that are in our medicine cabinets that are OTC, all the way to the kind of the newest and most recent entrants into the pharmaceutical space. If we're talking about things like Paxlovid, and obviously we need to think about any kind of drug that might be used every day by a whole group of different people, whether it's statins, right, whether it's things like antidepressants, right, all these kind of different kinds of drugs that we take every day. It's incredibly important that we ensure that they're both safe and that they're efficacious, that they do what they're supposed to do. Right. So the second reason why this could be important, I kind of touched on this a little bit earlier, is to find problems that might be rare or that we couldn't really get to in the clinical trial process. Right. These could be associated with certain events happening more frequently with a certain group, right? Or maybe events that we just didn't see a lot of in our clinical trials, but we're seeing them now as it hits the marketplace. And obviously that's not a place where we want to be in our pharmacovigilance practice, but if we're really being honest, sometimes that's just what happens, right? And so it's incredibly important to get to the bottom of why these things are happening, right? Because at the end of the day, all of us, whether you're in the sponsor, the CRO, the site, or as we are in the kind of the in the vendor and the technology space, all of our goals are aligned around making sure that our patients at the end of the day are taking safe drugs. I mean, that's all that we really care about, right? So it's incredibly important that we are capturing even these edge cases, right? That we're capturing them, that we're kind of running down what exactly is happening and making the necessary adjustments, right? And so folks, really the bottom line as to why it's important, it makes drugs safer for everyone who takes them. Really simple. I don't think I have to elaborate too much more on that point. Okay, so let's talk about some of the challenges. Right now, I've set the scene for you all. I think we all have a good understanding now around signal detection, how it kind of fits in and sits with pharmacovigilance, right? I always say that pharmacovigilance is the what, signal detection is the how. It's how we get to patient safety, right? And so now let's talk about some of the challenges that are out there, right, in the industry. Right, so challenge number one, and we see this really all across the clinical trial space, and this is of course also why Cloudbyz really exists as a company, and that is the lack of connected systems, right? So oftentimes we know that statistical analysis is happening in right, kind of different systems, right? So whether we're talking about SAS or perhaps R, right? These other systems where we're getting kind of like a data dump, or maybe it's an ETL connection, right? But these are oftentimes these are really not connected in the way that we're going to be talking about here today, right? So they're happening in a separate unconnected application, and this can sometimes lead to issues around lags, around around lags, around certain inefficiencies. So these are some of the issues that can happen right? As we're talking about if we have, unconnected systems. And because these systems might not be connected outside of some sort of, API integration or some sort of data migration schema, if they're not, we're unable to kind of leverage the real-time dynamic reporting that is really becoming the norm, right? And so while those, while other of these statistical analysis systems are pretty great, right? If they're not really connected to your data source in a real way, we can see all sorts of issues, right? Whether these are, kind of lags, or whether they're just your users are kind of logging into multiple systems, right? This can cause kind of issues around resourcing, or perhaps issues around people being able to access what they need to access in an easy way, right? Nobody on the end user side, as we know, likes to log into multiple applications to be able to do one job. Right. And so we're seeing that a lack of connected systems can oftentimes cause a lot of delays and inefficiencies in our workflows. The second one here is a lost decision chain. And this kind of fits into if you have multiple disparate systems, right? So as your signal detection strategies mature over time, right, and your teams, they may be changing, growing, etc., right? The perspective and the understanding for analyzing our safety data at the time can get lost, right? So think about maybe you had a really good algorithm, or you had some sort of really nice calculation that you guys were looking at for a certain class of drugs, or maybe a certain set of studies, right? But as your teams kind of grow and change and evolve, maybe the underlying reasons for that, they might have changed, right? And so if you don't have a centralized source of information, it means that some of this data can be getting lost, right? Some of the context around maybe why you went with a certain schema, why you chose to do a certain ROHAR, it gets calculated a certain way versus a different way, right? So all this information, it can get lost, right? If we're not kind of having a centralized audit trail that shows all the information for you in one place, right? So we hear sometimes in the market that, oh, this is not so much of an issue. We have things cataloged in emails, maybe it's in SOPs, maybe it's in Excel, God forbid, right? But we do know that that is something that we see often, right? And while those are, I would say, those are Band-Aids, right? We know that that is not really a best practice, right? It's best practice to have all the information around your signal detection practice be kept in a single centralized location that everybody has access to, not just in an email, not just in some certain SharePoint or somewhere else, right? It should be in a place that's accessible to all your key stakeholders and all your key end users. So lost decision chains is something that is, can be a real challenge, right? And is one of those things that you don't really think about until it happens to you, right? We don't really think about these things. And then when they do happen, suddenly it's a real issue. And so to avoid that, right, I think a best practice would be having some sort of audit trail, having some sort of centralized location of information that ensures that all of the context around some of your signal detection, some of your PV practices, they're all maintained in a single centralized place. All right. So insecure data analysis systems, right? So this is kind of the nightmare scenario, right? It's oftentimes some of these legacy systems that can carry some significant risk, around unauthorized access, right? We know that proprietary algorithms, data and methods, they need to be protected, right? That's the first step in any sort of PV or any sort of signal detection practice, is ensuring that the information that's key to our business is staying internal and is staying in-house, right? And so, oftentimes we do know that some of these other systems, right, especially if they're legacy, if they're not cloud, or right, they do carry some risk around who can access this data. So we're seeing methods such as SSO, which is single sign-on, MFA, which is multi-factor authentication, and IP restricted logins. All of these are various different strategies, right, that we need to do in order to better secure our systems. Right. And so that's incredibly important, right? Data integrity is the number one kind of calling card, right? That all of our PV and our signal detection practices should aim for. That should really be our North Star. And so, right, we're seeing that maybe just a login and password doesn't really cut it anymore, right? Certainly SSO MFA is becoming standard. I think we all are seeing that. Sometimes it is annoying as an end user, I'll admit. I find it irritating sometimes, but it is for the greater good, right? But we're seeing even more sophisticated methods being employed now around, even things like IP restricted logins. And what that means is that at the system level, right, we can set up these sets of IP addresses, and only those sets of IP addresses can access our system. So we're going even one level deeper in terms of making sure that the users accessing our systems are indeed the people who have the correct, credentials to do so. Right? It's not just password and username, but it's going one level deeper into tracking their IP address and making sure that Jane Doe is who she says she is. So we're seeing that being used increasingly across all the landscapes, right? Not just clinical trial, not just signal detection, really everywhere. Okay, so how do we solve these challenges? We've talked a little bit in depth. I gave you a quick primer as to kind of some of the things that we've learned, kind of being in the industry and having a lot of experience in this space. But now let's talk about how we solve some of these things. All right, so one of the ways in which we do that, folks, is to have a cloud-based system for pharmacovigilance, signal detection, or both, right? In such a way that your entire end-to-end pharmacovigilance practice is covered all the way from case intake and identification, all the way through all your various steps of your process, through to accurate regulatory submissions and accurate and powerful, insightful data analysis, right? And so one of the ways in which we're seeing some of the challenges that I talked about being solved is by having a single system, right, that kind of leverages industry standard practices as out of the box features, right? And so our system, the Cloudbyz Pharmacovigilance and Signal Detection solution, is built on top of the Salesforce platform. It can sit with the Salesforce Health Cloud. It can sit without the Salesforce Health Cloud as well, right? But that's kind of one of the ways that we're looking at to deliver the next generation results that are really being asked of us in this space, right? So we have everything covered from your case intake and triage, right? Whether that's connecting to a third-party data source, whether that's going to be through data migrations, et cetera, right? To have your case intake process happening in a single centralized location that allows you to perform your triage and your event processing, right? All in one system. So oftentimes there might be multiple quote unquote source data centers, but the source of truth can be a single cloud-based system as long as you can integrate. And because we're built on the Salesforce cloud platform, right, we're able to go ahead and do that pretty easily with our open APIs, right? So once you have your cases inside of your system, this means that we can perform event processing in a granular way, right? And so that means that all of your assessment, your adjudication workflows, all of this can be done inside of the system. That includes your medical coding, right? And we can use automated workflows to really help push this process along in a pretty fast way, right? In a meaningful way. This allows your end users to kind of be in the loop and get notified quickly when there's things like perhaps SAEs, right, that have to be dealt with, right, on a pretty strict time restriction, right? But it also gives management the ability to get that next level of insight into what's happening across the system, right? They know, right, who's working on what and where there are breakdowns perhaps in some of our workflows. Now, the most important part of any PV system is definitely the ability to create accurate regulatory submissions and be able to do pretty powerful signal detection. And so to that end, a little bit later, right, my colleague Manoj will kind of show you how we use Tableau that sits on top of Salesforce, powered by the Cloudbyz Pharmacovigilance solution to be able to do that. But that is kind of one way in which we can generate these accurate regulatory submissions.
Yeah.
Okay, so the Cloudbyz pharmacovigilance features, right? So just to go, a little bit deeper, right? So our system, the signal detection system as well, is really meant for all types of different users, whether it's healthcare professionals, whether it's regulatory, right? Your monitors, your DMs, your safety managers, et cetera. They can all kind of access the system at various different points, right? And then down below, you can see some of the different feature sets that we have, everything from your product management to HCP management, your call center management, right? Especially in the post-market space, it's very important. Again, all the way through to generating things like your CMs or your ICSRs, or being able to spit out pretty powerful signal detection dashboards, right, with the help of Tableau. Next slide, please. All right, so this kind of puts it all in one kind of frame for you. I do like this slide, right? And you can see how our PV and signal detection solution approach are kind of stacked, right? So let's go from left to right. So we have on the left the ability to connect our events database into a Cloudbyz system, right? Into our pharmacovigilance system, such that we can process any number of our events, whether these are ICSRs, whether these are your post-market events being reported by your patients, by your HCPs. Maybe you have some sort of web portal where this information is being captured today. We can integrate into that. Or perhaps you have a full call center functionality, right? And we can and you have an entire team on this just dedicated to getting these post-market events, right? All of these can be brought in and connected into the database and can be brought into a centralized source of truth in the cloud, right? And because we're leveraging Salesforce, that means you have the best in class security, you have the best in class, right? Kind of granular permissions, right? To make sure that your users are accessing the proper data. And then on top of that, folks, we can layer Tableau. As we know, Tableau is now a Salesforce company, right? We can layer in a Tableau statistical analysis feature that then grabs all this data that already exists on our platform and is then able to run signal detection, analytics, and do your final reporting that needs to be reported out to either the FDA, perhaps the EMA if you're doing your global studies, or really any third-party regulatory system. But that interplay between the Cloudbyz application built on Salesforce and then having the Tableau layered on top of that is really what gives you the ability, right, in one application under one set of credentials to be able to do your entire end-to-end pharmacovigilance and signal detection workflow without ever really having to leave the system. Right. And that is really what we think is somewhat new, and from what we've seen in the industry is kind of sorely lacking right now. So that's how we are leveraging the power of the Salesforce platform to be able to kind of deliver the next generation of end-to-end pharmacovigilance and signal detection processes, right? Allowing our users to just log in once, right, and be able to access and do everything that they need to do. All right, so I think this will set the scene nicely here for my colleague Manoj. So Manoj, if you could take the next maybe 5 to 10 minutes and kind of share your screen and kind of go through at a high level, right, kind of how our signal detection works and some of the things that we've been able to create, right, in our system.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Dushyant, for setting up excellent platform for us to show some actions actually in the signal detection part. All right, folks. Now I'll be showing you some of the use cases we have worked on when it comes to signal detection. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so here we have worked on FDA adverse event report system data for the first quarter of 2022. Before we jump into any signal detection part or any of the particular signals, we'll take a bird view of like overall what the data is, how the demography is, how the drugs distribution kind of and all. And every of these scenarios and use cases, or some of them are built on based on some of the requirements we are seeing in the market too. I'll be walking you through a couple of use cases, and this dashboard will be completely interactive. You can drill down to any level and see how the data distributions are. For example, here what we are seeing here is like for first quarter of 2022, FDA has received around 500,000 of cases with around 17.5 unique drugs reported by around 388 manufacturers or across 146 countries. We can also see here like the death count registered are around close to somewhere close to 42,000. And here we'll see the outcomes, if the cases are from United States or out of United States. Since we are looking at FDA data, we look at if the case is from United States or out of United States, like distribution by gender and age-wise outcomes. If it's an initial case, follow-up case, and we can also drill down to particular case here, and we can look at the top 10 manufacturers reporting, top 10 drugs, and the type of reports we have received, kind of and all. Let me just give you an example of how we can drill down to particular use case. For example, if you want to look at female cases reported in United States, which are like follow-up cases, you can just select the icons here like that. Female cases in United States. You can see that we have around 140,000 female cases registered in United States, and we can look at like follow-up cases. So now the entire dashboard moves according to it. Like we can see how the distribution of particular female cases. We can see that majority of the patients are in the age range of like 50 to 80s, and like nearly 62% of the cases are expedited cases, and most of them are like reported by Pfizer, like that. These are some of the use cases. What we can, how the level of granularity that we can drill down this dashboard into. For example, I'll show you some of the interesting observation we can make here. Like if you look at in total death cases, we can see that majority of the death cases are like reported by Novartis, and most of the death cases are expedited cases. This point to be noted, like more than 90% of the cases of death cases were like expedited cases. Same like that, if you look at disability cases, majority of them are like periodic cases, and out of like around 14,500 cases, more than 50% of the cases are like, reported by Purdue. This is how we can see, particular use cases. Not just that, we can drill down to one particular case too. Like we can drill down to a particular case and see. Yeah, we can see that like this particular case is a follow-up case reported in the January of 2022, and it's a female case reported in United States by Pfizer, and it's an expedited case. The reason why you're not seeing any drug here is because this particular case have not taken any of the drugs among top 10 drugs. So this is the level of granularity we can drill down in this bird view itself. These are some of the use cases that these are in demand. Actually, we have received a couple of this kind of requirements from our prospects and all. These are very much of requirements that these are designed based on a couple of requirements too. All right, now look at some of the drugs. Since we have like more than 17,500 drugs, we look at like top 5 drugs which has registered majority of reactions. Like in the top, you can see if the drug is registered as concomitant, interacting, or primary suspect drug or secondary suspect drug. Here, the word cloud, what you see are like the top 100 reactions registered for these particular set of drugs. And here you see the outcomes, and here DCHAL and RECHAL. Or DCHAL in the sense in FAIRS reports, right? DCHAL in the sense if the reaction has abated upon stopping the drug therapy, which means like if a person is having headache while having particular drug, if he stop the drug and the headache stops, that's when the DCHAL will positive. Okay, and RECHAL in the sense if the reaction has restarted upon restarting the therapy. I mean, like a reaction reoccurred upon restarting the drug therapy. For example, if a person is having a headache upon consuming particular drug, and if he stops the drug, the headache is gone. And again, after 2 weeks, he restarts the drug therapy, and the headache is again, he's feeling headache. That's when the RECHAL is said to be positive. This is a very unique case. It's considered as actually a clinical data too. So that's the reason we can see a very less percentage, like only 0.26% of out of like our entire database is having positive RECHAL. This is considered a clinical signal too. That's what we're gonna look in like coming next dashboard. For example, I'll show you how we can drill down this dashboard. Here we can see that what are the routes these drugs are taken through. For example, when prednisone is taken through oral, the active ingredient registered is prednisone itself. For different drugs, there will be different too. For example, if you look at OxyContin, the active ingredient is oxycodone hydrochloride, like that. We will see the active ingredients and how many reactions registered. What are the particular reactions that have been registered through. When OxyContin is taken through oral, we can see that like 34 times it has been registered as a primary suspect drug. When it is registered as primary suspect drug, we can see in one case, death was registered. We cannot directly jump into a conclusion that this particular drug has caused the outcome. However, like the patient might be taking different drugs too, but this is an broader outer view to look at, at drug level. So now we'll move on to signal detection. Actually, Dushyant has explained about pharmacovigilance excellently, and he has given a couple of explanation on what about how the signal detection is performed in the industry. Signal detection it's actually a process of actively searching for and identifying safety signals from a wide variety of data. In signal detection, right, we broadly classify into clinical signals and statistical signals. Clinical signals in the sense, for example, the dashboard, what you are seeing now, drilling into a recharge particular, as I mentioned before. And statistical signal in the sense, we have a lot of metrics. What we choose for this use cases particularly is like ROR, like reporting order ratio. I'll come to what is that. For example, I'll show you like when it comes to recharge, we can select a particular drug here. We can see that out of 309 cases which have taken case in the sense patients which have taken prevision, like 64 cases have not more than saying 64 cases, so like 64 drug at 64 times the reactions have been registered to be having positive recharge. Here you can see that the weight wise seriousness levels, like dead or serious, like 63% of patients are dead or serious in this particular weight group, and 37% of patients are non-serious, like that. Actually, majority of the patients will be serious more than that, And here we can see that, now this is how you read this dashboard. Like, for example, when a set of patients have taken prevision, in 6 cases, right, urticaria have recurred upon restarting the drug therapy upon consumption of on an average of 50 grams of prevision. Now this is a clinical signal. Now you see that like what are the reactions that are recurring upon consuming what quantity of drug for how many cases. Now it's a level of clinical signal. Okay, now let's move on to I'll show you quickly how the statistical signals look like, or in the sense reporting odds ratio. This shows like whether the drug event combination has reported more than expected, or like expected or more, like that. In left you see like top 25 drugs registering nausea. It's like based on this table, right? It's very easy to say that like prednisone has registered majority of the ROR cases. Also, if you look at the dashboard, we have some crazy number of RORs, like 99. These are all very crazy numbers. This won't happen actually. The reason why you're seeing this number is like only 2 reactions were registered, and once it was registered as nausea, like that. Actually, here what we need to do is like finding food in the mud. That's the purpose of statistical signals. Actually, here we'll set a threshold of like at least 100 nausea reactions should be registered. This dashboard is for medical expertise to play around. They will set the threshold and they can make that decision, even as it is mentioned on CIOMS forms and EDURA vigilance of EMA. Actually, just by looking at signals, we are not supposed to draw any conclusions. Either data analyst or a data scientist is not supposed to draw any conclusions. The medical expertise should take a look at this dashboard, and they filter particular drugs based on some thresholds, and they'll take a deep look into the statistics, and they'll decide it. For example, here we've seen like prednisone register majority of the nausea, but that doesn't mean that it has very high odds of occurring nausea. For example, you see here like Zofran has like 3.2, like Ibrance has 3. What it in the sense, how you read it in the sense, Ibrance has 3 times the odds of occurring nausea compared to all the drugs in the database. That's how you read this. But if you look at prednisone, it has very less ROR. For example, 0.8. It has this, even though this drug has registered many times nausea, but this has very less odds of occurring, nausea. See, we have done for one particular like event combination of all drugs, like we call it as drug event combinations. We can also go for many other events. For example, any like particular heart related issues, whatever it's there, not just like nausea. We can go for anything. It's just for demo purpose. All right. So what you have seen here is like majority of it is like completely you have seen the demo in Tableau. Now we have actually embedded the same complete story lineup and the dashboards in our own, cloud-based CTMS and like Signal in our PV systems. For now, I have like brought it into CTMS system because of like just for testing. We'll be having the same dashboards and story lineups in our PV systems too. Even in here, you can select particular drugs, and just like what we have seen in the last dashboard, right? Just like that, you can drill down here. In here, actually, we have received like this some of the requirements too. What if like we need to drill down for one particular case and we need to make the comment on that particular case? Well, now actually nowhere the data is residing on Salesforce. Like we are bringing the data. We have used GCP as our repository and pulled the data through Snowflake into Tableau and then pushing it to Salesforce. And also a point for you to mention is that what you're looking at here is indeed a big data. What you're looking is like looking at around more than 500,000 of cases. Like in total, we have 7 tables across like more than 3 million rows working on it, and you see the entire dashboard working seamlessly with like excellent latency. So that's the power of our systems. You can even drill down to particular cases. Since we don't have the related objects here, these are like external data. If we are capturing the data in our own EDC system, you can drill down to particular use case here, look at the statistics, and from here directly you can go to particular case and comment on the you can write any comments on the particular case. Since we are pulling the data from outside, we will have to navigate to particular object here and do that. But if the data is residing on our own system, then you'll be having a button or a link here. You will just be able to navigate to particular case and make comments on. So what the purpose of these all statistics, what we are doing in a sense, like just imagine we are receiving more than 500,000 cases for one quarter. Just think about if they want to look at like 5 or 6 years of data, it will be like huge data. And going through each and every use case scenarios and looking for signal detection is like almost next to impossible for medical expertise, and it's a very time consuming process. Our system at Cloudbyz like provides the luxury for medical expertise, saving their valuable time to filter out drugs based on statistical based insights and catch handful of drugs. Right now here you can see that like out of 17,500 drugs, we have caught like just handful of drugs. What you are seeing in red, right? These are all like the drugs that they have to take a deep look into. These are all like just a handful of drugs now they have drilled down into. Just imagine the time that we can save for medical expertise, or who are the people want to look at the entire data and make some decisions on that. So yeah, this was the major part of our demo. Dushyant.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much, Manoj, for all that. That was,
sure.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that was fantastic. Thank you so much. So, all right.
Sure.
All right. So yeah, Bernadette, I believe we have some questions in the chat. Could you kind of just go through and let us know what we should be answering right now?
You are correct. We have a lot of questions that have come in. So let's see how many we can get to. I love this game. It's my favorite part of every webinar. So Manoj, I got a question recently that just came in about, can we connect to multiple file forms in different databases in Tableau?
Absolutely, Baron. Yeah, we can connect multiple data sources, even if it is a static file like on your system, or if it is residing in different databases. For example, consider you have 2 or 3 tables in MySQL, 2 or 3 tables in Snowflake, and 2 or 3 tables in your own system. If you want to create a particular schema and like create a particular schema like ER diagrams and take a look into the data, then absolutely you can connect all the databases and you can just pull the data into Tableau. But the only thing is that since we are dealing with a relational database, you have to always keep in the mind that we need connector keys. If the tables are having connecting keys, you can pull data from wide variety of data sources, and you can work on that. Absolutely, yes, we can do that.
Great. Awesome. Dushyant, I have one that just came in for you. What does the future of PV and signal detection look like? Whoa.
Yeah, that's a big one. In fact, maybe that's a topic for a different webinar as well. But really, folks, if you really kind of look at it, the future is really limitless. And at the same time, it's also here, right? Because we're seeing really big advances in things like AI, right? That's artificial intelligence, machine learning, and natural language processing that allow us to get these next level insights, right? And then obviously using tools like Tableau can actually help forecast, right? Things like your signal detection, pieces as well, right? So, already what we're seeing, I think a good use case is, companies are using natural language processing, right? To go ahead and kind of look at certain events that are coming in through email, or maybe they're coming in through some different sources, being able to pick out, right, really important information, based on that, create its own adverse event, right? And then push it to either a human reviewer, or we're even seeing, machine learning algorithms kind of going through and actually running their own adjudication process, right? That will always have a human reviewer, but is really taking some of the manual labor out of this process, right? Kind of freeing up your medical teams to be able to do maybe some more value add work. So we're definitely seeing those things. They're happening right now, right? But I think we're still at the phase in the market where maybe a lot of companies are still maybe a little, shall we say, hesitant, right? But I think we're seeing in the next 3 to 5 years, I think we're going to see a huge revolution in how these events are being not just tabulated and assessed, but also how they're being analyzed as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Manoj, is it possible to create alerts based on some thresholds in Tableau? That's come up quite a bit in the comment section.
Yeah, absolutely. We can create particular alerts too. I mean, like we can set a particular set of alerts to go to particular users based on the requirements. And yeah, absolutely, we can set the alerts based on some of the thresholds. When the data hit a particular threshold level and above, the related set of people will be receiving alerts either in email or Slack, whatever they choose, based on the data when it hits a certain level of threshold. Yes, absolutely, we can do that.
Awesome. And then this is a question for probably both of you. How easy is it to connect Tableau and Salesforce?
Yep. So maybe Manoj, I'll take that first, and maybe you can finish it off. So, absolutely, it's extremely important. It's extremely easy to do that, right? We have a couple different ways to do that, right? It does. They fit together really like two kind of puzzle pieces, right? And so, as you saw in my diagram, where we can have Tableau kind of sit on top of Salesforce, that's very easy to do, right? But there are also some other options as well. But certainly, I think it would be a really good value add if you're using the Cloudbyz Pharmacovigilance system to just have a Tableau as an add-on. It'll sit really kind of perfectly. So, Manoj, I think there are some other use cases, correct?
Yes, Dushyant. I mean, like, if you want to pull the Tableau dashboards, what you create into the Salesforce, absolutely, it's simple to do that. Like we can do it very quickly. If your data is like in the Salesforce itself, then it's easy to pull and like you can see the whatever the data that's residing in Salesforce org itself, you can analyze that data. Or like if you're having data in any other platform, you can still analyze it in Tableau and pull it into your particular orgs, and you can look at that data. If, for example, in some of the use cases, they will be having a very little rows. I mean, like they will be having small data, and they need to make a couple of decisions based on insights that have been drawn from big data. At that time, you can connect to particular databases where that data is in, and you can work on that and like make decisions on that too. Absolutely, you can do that.
Fantastic.
Awesome. That's great. Another question is coming for you directly, Manoj. How granular can you get with the permissions in Tableau?
So we can set like a field level access or a row level access based on the requirements. If there are a particular set of users, they want particular field level access, we can make sure that they are able to see and work on particular fields itself. Or if they want like row level access, and we can also set that too. Yes, we can do like based on field level or row level. I mean, like data level access. Like that.
That's awesome. Very good to hear. Dushyant, how quickly is the implementation of Cloudbyz PV and Tableau? Does
Sure.
it take a long
Yep,
time?
that's a great question. I think that's a great question to end on as well, Bernadette. If we have a couple
Yeah.
more, we can always answer via email.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
absolutely. It really does depend on the requirements and the use cases that we're talking about here, right? I would say the average implementation for pharmacovigilance is for our system is anywhere between 6 to about 10 weeks. But again, that really depends on the size that we're looking at and what the requirements may be. Right. And when we're talking about Tableau, again, the same caveats apply, right? Kind of depending on the level of sophistication that we're looking at here, but it could be anywhere between 2 to 6 weeks, right? Once you have the initial data kind of in there. So I would say that that's a benchmark. And if people are definitely interested in kind of learning more, feel free to reach out via email, and we'd be happy to set up a quick call and just see how much more specific we can get with that.
Awesome. Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining us here today. Thank you to Manoj for kind of jumping in and being a great team player here. And of course, thank you as always, Bernadette. This has been another edition of the Cloudbyz Conversations, Lunch and Learn kind of webinar. So we have another one coming up in August. I think we'll have the dates for that released here in the next week or so. So yeah, we're super excited to keep these going. If you guys have any ideas for things that you want to see, just feel free to reach out via email or via LinkedIn, and we'll be happy to get back to you. So with that, we'll give you some time back on this beautiful Thursday. Everyone go enjoy. Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody, for joining.
Bye, everyone.